is to complete the OHDSI phenotype immigration into the Cipher VA Phenotype Library. And we piloted this on a number of phenotypes last year, and Jackie has led the work and showed success and even presented that work in AEMI. I don't see Jackie on the call today. But our aim is to finish that process and integrate the rest of the library. However, there is a decision point of what to integrate, because we do have in our OHDSI Phenotype Library, we have a collection of phenotypes that we generated automatically using the vocabulary. And we call those referent cohorts, but we didn't really look at them at all in terms of evaluating what they are capturing. We basically didn't review them, and we don't feel comfortable moving those to Cipher just because, only because they're going to have an OHDSI phenotype tag. We don't want people to think that those were actually reviewed or have any certain like quality associated with them. So that means we don't want to integrate the full set, but we want to have some filtering process, and we have not yet figured this out. So one item on our agenda today is to look at the entire log of the phenotype library and basically decide on which one we're going to go to Cipher, if there's a way that we can filter our definitions in a systematic way, or not like manual review, so we can send what we need to Cipher and get that work done. So that's an action item, and we thought we could use some of the time today to look at the log together as a work group and see which ones we are not comfortable with sending into an external community. The second item, our action item from previous requests. So we do have the phenotype for anterior uveitis. And I thought we will be done by now, but I actually hit there is something wrong with the definition currently that the group worked on that I'm unable to troubleshoot. And because the logic is very complex, I can't even find where is the error. But when we try, Gowtham, when I try to generate this, yeah, Jackie, I see your comment. No worries, we can do this without you on the call. But when I try to generate the definitions in our data sources, Gowtham, it kind of fails. Like there's a bug in the logic that stopped the generation, and that's new, and I can't figure it out. So maybe I can share my screen, and if Ben or Andrew is in the call, we can also troubleshoot with them. But we hit like something in the definition. We changed the definition lately that is causing it to completely bounce off. So that was the second item, HSV anterior uveitis, that's the phenotype. And then the third item on the agenda is, I don't see Anna. We wanted to follow up with Anna and see where is the tracker for the phenotype February definitions and if they're ready to immigrate them to the library. But I don't see Anna. She had that responsibility. Okay. You're good now, Gowtham? Oh, maybe he's not. Okay, any other agenda item anybody have that would like to add? Nope.
I don't know if we'll have time to discuss it, but briefly touching base on the potentially inappropriate medication definition.
Yes.
Yeah, would be
so
nice.
So what happened is Gowtham was had some changes, and he had some action items. So Gowtham, you still have those JSONs, and it was the last thing that happened. I looked at the JSONs. I took the definitions. I replicated them in our J&J environment, and I can they run. So they generate cohorts, but we now need to integrate them into Gowtham, basically integrate them into the onto the phenotype, OHDSI Phenotype Library, so we can actually run them across the network.
Okay. Rich, I'll follow up with you, and we'll take that as an action item. That will be done.
So there's we just need a technical step. We just need a technical step that is the taken. And I can re-email you the we have a zip file that has all of them.
Okay.
And I did put them all in our environment, and I can like they run on our instance, so they should be legit in terms of like just technically are they working on OMAP.
Got it. Okay, so I'll look. That will be part of an action item. So, apologies, everybody. I just had a odd technical glitch. My computer wouldn't respond to me. It won't read when I restart it. It wouldn't recognize my keyboard. But now it's all solved. I'm sharing my screen. So that's the agenda item that Azza walked through. Do we want to go through them one at a time, Azza, now in more detail? Like, do you want? I have the.
No, we can start just confirming that we don't have any other agenda items. Yeah, and maybe we can briefly just inform everybody about the Book of OHDSI work, and yeah, maybe Gautam, you just mention that, because just make sure that everybody is aware.
Yeah. So there's information sharing things that we have to do, right? This is part of the information sharing. The Book of OHDSI is not something that is managed by this group. Everybody in the OHDSI community are work through the educational work group to contribute. I am trying to figure out what is the best way to contribute the work, our thinking on cohort definitions, phenotyping, phenotype development evaluation, phenotype library, and those related items. The clinical validity subgroup has a charter, and the editors are Christian Reich and Sarah Seeger. And so they have created a process for it. So if you're interested in contributing to this, I encourage you to engage with them in the education work group. And they have been meeting. I think they have done several working sessions to create the content and assign responsibilities to various people. And there's a lot of interest in the cohort phenotyping areas, and others have stepped up to contribute. So if you are interested in contributing as a community effort, I'm just calling this to your attention that there is an opportunity there to be part of the second book of OHDSI.
And I think the only thing as it relates to phenotyping is that based on the current outline of the book, there is kind of two. There's a chapter or a section of a chapter for phenotype, and then there's a section on the validity of phenotypes. And I believe we already have you, myself, and Joel contributing to those chapters. But if there's any, if you guys have any comments, or if you're interested to contribute, or if you have any advice or comment or thinking of how what should the phenotype section cover, please let us know.
This one, update on clinical description prompt, I'm just going to go from the bottom up because these are previously discussed items. So one of the discoveries of the Phenotype February was the prompt that we have publicly placed in the OHDSI GitHub, OHDSI Phenotype Library GitHub repository, and its subpages is very generic in the sense that it prints a long content that is not customized to the context of the research question. And then the second observation is that it is very pharmacovigilance heavy, which may not be all the use cases. So as part of planning for how to improve this, I have written a paper that is in the file section, and I can show you that. I think it was shown before. why a clinical description is important in OHDSI, just conceptually talking about it. And that is here, clinical description as semantic anchors. I encourage you to look at it. There's a lot of people who've already looked at it and provided their input. It's been out there for some time now. So I encourage you to look into it. And that, I think, will help create a better engineered prompt for us. So that's and there's a few other things like the idea of a phenotyper and the idea of there's one more idea, but here it is. This is again a community effort. This is the main artifact that's going to feed into the next set of prompts. And the way I'm thinking about this prompt is it asks for inputs from the user about their intent and some clinical idea, and then it frames the output in the form of an atlas core definition with entry event criteria, a set of inclusion rules, and exit criteria, and customizes it based on the operating characteristics required for the study. So that's the current thinking, and that's been discussed before, and it's also written up in a one form of a paper.
Gautam, on that topic, I don't know. Yeah, Joel is on the call. We have kind of run a real world experiment the last 2 months on a project we had in J&J for a bulk of phenotypes, like 45 phenotypes that we had to develop, and we tried to follow the same process, but with some somewhat advances. And Joel actually already had adjusted your original prompt to kind of avoid the issues that we had, and he had a different prompt that we utilized, and we used that to generate clinical descriptions. But then instead of just taking that as a static thing, based on the clinical description and the label for each of the phenotypes, we then identified questions to clarify certain ambiguities for every definition that we then went to the clinical kind of team to remove that ambiguity. And then we use that information to revise the clinical description. And Joel did that also, again, going back to the original generated text from AI. And that how we finalized the clinical description that became our input for like concept set selection.
Yep, that's perfect. That's the reasoning framework is the way to go. Yep.
So instead of trying to get a new prompt, I was wondering, Joel, if we could just use the one you already have and we kind of used for 45 like use cases. And I don't know how you felt about that after we got the input and you went through updating those definitions, those clinical descriptions.
Yeah, I think the final prompt that we have, or the current final prompt that we have, has worked pretty well for that study that we were working on, Azza. So we can use that in put that out for the group to look at.
Yep.
Yeah. I see a hand, but
yeah, just a quick question. This is of course a fascinating topic. When you're producing the cohort definition description, the thing is generated. To what extent are you trying to have? And I'm just curious this for research purposes. To what extent are you having the LLM also have information about the specific data set or information from the data dashboards or anything else that might help kind of say, well, here's a cohort definition sort of matches your objective based on the clinical description, and also here's some considerations with respect to the data sets that you're trying to run this on, not just the common data model, but sort of the nuances of like, is it electronic health records data set and from what setting and that sort of thing. Are you integrating any of that yet? Are you thinking in that direction at all? Just curious. Or does that make sense?
John,
Yeah,
you want to start because you experimented on that, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't necessarily looked at specific data sets. I mean, that's something it'd be nice a little bit in the future to be able to do, RAGs with LLM to be able to get the information in there. I think that's a definitely an area we're going to have to tackle at some point.
That's something I'm working on. So I'd like to, if there's a sub team or something like that that you all plan to work on that, that's something that I'm working on specifically in research here at Pitt and in the OHDSI Collaborative as well. Plus, we're thinking of laying a foundation for when Atlas gets revised. Atlas Web API gets to version 4, where it's a complete redesign. Like, how could this stuff be integrated into a user interface as well? So yeah, please keep me in the loop on that, and I'll contribute back whatever I find. We work on augmented generation knowledge graphs in this space as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, conceptually, if you break down our framework into what is the target clinical idea, what are the definitions what are the definitions we can build to model the target clinical idea, how do these definitions, algorithms work in terms of sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value, negative predictive value, and any qualitative information on one or more data sources, and then curation to the library. I still think about separation of describing the target clinical idea from the data source, but I've heard people say, and rightfully so, because some data sources are so specialized that even standardization to something like an OMAP common data model does not reduce the need to understand the data source specific nuances. So how much of the data source information should be kept while thinking about the target clinical idea? I don't know yet, but that's a good problem to tackle.
And I'm thinking of it in the framework of causal inference and identification theory. So that if, thinking about it with respect to, could a model with some augmentation be able to assist with identifying auxiliary variables or assisting with sort of the way to think through the identification of, is this a data set that you could actually answer this question with? And so, because the common data model just gets you to the point that the data is all stored in a way that you can query it the same, but every data set for a specific research question has it isn't just like the data set is the data set plus the research question that you're trying to accomplish is really what you have to think about. So I understand the separation concerns that you think about, but I think we were at this point where we might be able to get a lot of assistance from these models when they're augmented to help really get these, all the other ideas that the OHDSI Collaborative is putting in to start to integrate them to make better study designs. So it's a really exciting point right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But can I ask a clarification? So are you guys thinking of, at the time that you're defining particular cohorts in the data using Atlas or anything else, are you thinking of how can we learn from the data what it has, or where the records are, or what terms are in there that are close to a particular given label? Or are you, when you say we're using the data to help us, or are you thinking of what codes I might be selecting for a particular clinical idea and so forth? What component of the data you're using and to inform which part of the process?
Yeah, there'll be several kind of focused use cases, as there has to be for this, because it can get out of control. But we're working on the potentially inappropriate medication use case right there. And you said earlier you got them in the J&J or whatever, and you ran them. That's great. So I actually tried to run some of these in a different environment, the VA environment, and the way that they coded their inpatient, outpatient, so forth exposures, their drug exposure types were a little bit different. And so and that's something that as somebody, if I come to the phenotype library and I've got this clinical definition and I'm like, okay, this phenotype might match this clinical definition pretty well, but then the data set I'm going to run it against has some nuances with respect to the differences in coding that nobody knew in advance, because that's specific to that data set, even though they followed the rules of standardization. The thing about a standard is everybody can interpret it a little bit differently. So if there could be information in the data quality dashboard and other places that a model could pull together and say, for this specific data set, you should be aware that probably that phenotype definition needs to be modified in such and such way. That's kind of one use case. There's many, the scientific, like thinking about a causal model for the kind of question that you're asking. The parameterized knowledge plus augmented knowledge could actually probably assist with that and then inform that clinical definition. And then there's another use case, which is just more trivial, which is just like efficiency of running these things. A lot of times people come and they design their cohort definitions and they go to implement them and they work on smaller data sets, but much larger data sets. They don't realize there's inefficiencies. I've done this many times. There's inefficiencies in how I designed like the entry and the inclusion criteria. And then the model can suggest, you could refactor that in such a way so that it will run more quickly and actually probably get a better answer. So I think there's we need to enumerate several use cases around this sort of data informed suggestions for someone as they're designing their protocol, and translating from the clinical study. But I think it's like there's an interaction between the data sets and the clinical research questions that there's an area to study in terms of how could augmented models actually assist in that space.
We do data informed phenotyping already, like the whole idea of the OHDSI network level concept ID record counts. That is already a data informed phenotyping. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense, and using an LLM to be informed of that will help us with curating it. I think the nuance here is, do we use some meta learning across multiple data sources to train the LLM, or do we use a single data source that is in one site to support the special unique scenarios of using like local codes or local coding systems? I like the meta approach.
Yeah, because I was just very close to this idea. We experimented and we were very early on, but the idea of if we to use LLM to kind of scale and automate phenotype development, starting off concept selection or code selection. In theory, when we said what are the parameters or attributes we will need to consider ahead of time, in theory, the data source and the kind of data is always or the data provenance was always an item. But so we put it in there, and then we said, let's just take an example and try to answer what is it about all these attributes that we need to specify ahead of time before we go and select codes. And see which of these factors actually mattered. So if it's X, then the concept set would be this, but if it's Y, then it will be different in that way. So we did this video on a very small example, and when I did it with our data sources, and that's just one example, the data source variable didn't change anything. Basically, it didn't materialize to any different concepts. It still was the same concept set, regardless if it was EHR or if it was claims in our case. But that could be, number one, could be that phenotype itself didn't matter. But I also think within our network in J&J, we don't have that much diversity with the data sources, right? So it maybe will never matter. But if you think across all the network, and now you think of registries or oncology data, or then you might start getting into those scenarios. But we will never know until we actually have a network of data that we can try phenotyping across. And you can take what we currently do is usually you have a data partner in one data source that develop a phenotype for that data. And then we try to see if it transfers fine and try to learn where the nuance. But I think only if we have a full experiment where we have those as different diverse data sources, and we try to develop cohort for all of them, then we can start to understand what does need to go to the model in terms of the data. Is it the list of codes that the data has? Is it certain where is the encounter, to your point, in the VA? Is it outpatient, inpatient, on all the, but so far we don't really know what those things are, but maybe a model can find them for us, because we don't need the human brain to conceptualize. But that's where models can really help us understand. What about the data that can inform the selection of codes, for example, or the logic?
Yeah, I think so. And not to make this more complicated, but you could possibly add on potential concerns around just other kinds of biases that you need to be aware in terms of like the population that you're going to operate on, because the data set might represent a specific population. Like our data sets at Pitt, the one I have, tends to be older adults, but Pitt is not a very racially diverse area. And you get a lot of that out of just your table 1 characteristics and stuff. But at the time that you're doing the study design and thinking about the data sets that you know, your partners that you have access to, you know, the more you can know up front about that and have it sort of generated would be really useful. So I like Gowtham and everybody, what you just said about data-informed phenotype design. I think that's definitely the way to go. And I also favor the meta kind of approach as well. And there's other things we can say about it, but I don't want to take too much time. So just really intriguing topic. The augmentation side of it, I try to move away from retrieval augmented generation, because I think this is a knowledge graph kind of a component here where it's going to be augmented generation. It doesn't have to be approximate nearest neighbor matching and uncertainty around this. The knowledge graph itself could be pretty robust and just based on structural queries. But then when you get into specific research questions, because it's a research question, neither the generated model nor the knowledge graph sometimes is going to have certain relationships or nodes in there because it's research. So to explore that topic, there's actually some other methods now in graph neural networks that might become applicable as well. So there's been a lot of advances in the last couple of years in that space that we can look at.
Very cool. Okay, but in terms of action item, maybe for that, Gautam, maybe we can take the prompt from Joel for now and see if that works fine with this theoretical description that you had in the write-up.
Absolutely.
On the clinical,
Absolutely.
in the
Joel,
clinical intent and so.
Yeah, you can post the prompt here as a file in the file section, or give it to me and I'll put it. Okay, so we talked about anterior chamber uveitis. We don't have Anna here, but we need to get phenotype February code definitions into the OHDSI library. We talked a lot about clinical description. We have talked about inappropriate use. We talked about the book of OHDSI.
Hold on.
Good.
Gautam, you're going too fast. But on the phenotype February follow-up, I see some of the study leads here. Let me see.
Good.
Yeah, if is Annie, who do I see? Now I see all abbreviations, can't find the full names.
Is there anybody from the phenotype February who's worked on phenotypes here on the call?
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Tanya said yes. Are you first let me ask you, Tanya, do you guys finish the trackers? Are all the IDs locked off? You guys like your cohorts are all done?
We did one last run, and there is a very, very subtle change I want to make, and I still haven't made it, but me and my study participants really do not believe it will affect like substantially the phenotype so that we would need an additional run. So I will make this change next week, like really, really small, a couple of concepts added, and then they will be locked in, yes. So
Okay.
for us, out of 22, 9 of the phenotypes were something that worked, and that was totally expectable. Yeah. So that's it.
And Tanya, are you still using the same tracker where you're putting your IDs and all of that?
Basically, the IDs are not changing, so I'm just modifying the same concept, cohort definitions. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's just one example, but maybe we'll reach out to Anne now when she's back and running, and we can reach out to all the other study leads. And once we get that everything is locked, we can retrieve those IDs from Atlas demos. Okay. And then let's see, is Andrew or Lynn here, or Brian for anterior uveitis, HSV?
I'm here.
Okay, So I'm going to share my screen. I have no idea. So I think it is, maybe I'll share it for everybody. There is definitely a bug right now. But because now with the definition got so complicated, I'm going to close this one. The last final definition we reached was, give Atlas a minute. I copied it just before the call and it removed some of the inclusion criteria that looked weird. And I thought, let's see if, and now it's generating 0, but at least it's completing. Atlas gonna take a minute.
Oh, sorry. Did I just change?
And now you have, oh, it's still not sharing. Good. You guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. This is a copy I made, but let me.
Is that the first one?
Yeah. No, that's a copy I just did. So here's the final one that the group has sent me. Welcome. Okay. So we have all these different inclusion criteria. And the one thing I'm sure of is the inclusion criteria is pretty fine. So we have a condition occurrence of, yeah, there's many ideas in there, but we have some of them are source code, and then we have a measurement, and then we have all of those. We're taking all events, and then we are removing these ideas. So we have, they have to have evidence of herpes simplex infection in the eye. And that can happen through one of those 3 conditions. And this is what we were playing with last time. But basically, the person has to qualify one of those. Many different logic pieces. But they have to have the specimen that has the specimen of uveitis having the following criteria. So the specimen followed with a, the specimen that was kind of followed with a diagnosis. Or with a PCR that was also followed with a diagnosis. Or auto PCR that is positive. That's all just positive. Now it's a measurement that is positive, or a measurement that has a value. Auto PCR that is positive. Well, this is redundant, right? Maybe it's a different concept set for positive. And now you have a procedure. This is a source code on the procedure. This is atrophy. So all of those suggest that the person basically have evidence of herpes simplex infection in the eye. Is it a positive PCR or iris atrophy or keratitis? Then they can't have all of those. So this is simple. Syphilis, simple. But the same thing, because they're getting on the same idea from a measurement or a diagnosis or a procedure and so on. This is simple. I think those ones are causing some issues. You see this?
I think, yeah, you're probably right. It has to do something with one of the PCR related concept sets, because I don't know if you remember, but when we were running it, both the iris atrophy and the keratitis, like specific phenotype definitions that we had made, they were able to run, but it was just the final phenotype and then the one specific to PCR or HSV positive PCR tests. So I think that may be something, there's something there.
You mean, but we only played with this criteria, right? The 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stayed on their own, right?
Oh
We
no,
didn't.
I know, yeah. So yeah, we played only with that one criteria, but the 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 keratitis portion and the iris atrophy portion of that criteria, remember we had split it up. Those two
Yes.
specific phenotypes, they were able to run and generate numbers.
Correct. Yeah.
Hmm. So yeah, it's really interesting though, because when I was running it on, or running the same logic that we sent to you on the demo, there was no like bug or failure uh, on that end. So I'm curious why it would work on the
Yeah.
demo version, but not work on the the actual
So Gautam,
databases.
I get this. Like it completes, but you're muted.
Yeah, this will require looking at the logs because there might be something unique. Let's skip this one, I think, because it requires much more detail. Maybe we need to have developer access to the backend.
Yeah, but I also, yeah, it was like maybe in the copying and pasting.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I think we
You know,
cannot troubleshoot this in this call. This will require a little bit deeper technical dive.
yeah, you know what? One last thing before we dwell into this. Maybe maybe I will go and find it in demo, the last one, and just do a fresh get the JSON and just walk through it. Maybe when we copied the JSON, there is a mistake and it's causing the cohort to be like buggy on this
Okay.
like final one. So if you just put in the chat the actual the last ID that we have from the demo, I'll just do one more time before we trying to see if there's actually something wrong in the actual one or the transfer of the JSON
Okay.
for that one that was like had the entire logic in it was corrupted.
Okay. I'll send that one, and I'll send the PCR one as well, just in case. But I'll go ahead and do that, and then we can continue on with the rest of the meeting agenda.
And Andrew, when you run it on your own, like clinical data source, you guys like all these logic pieces matter, correct? Because you have like so many granular stuff, which none of it will show in our data sources. But when you run it on your EHR, you guys are getting stuff, correct? Like like you need all those. Okay.
Yes. So I believe Dr. Toy, he ran it on the UFC database, and we were able to get some information from there, and yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I now I'm thinking about it. It must be because we did like 5, 6 of them. There must have been bug in the JSON transfer. So let's start fresh again. Sorry. Okay, Gautam, we can go to the next.
Okay. Let's see.
The VA. If you have the log, yeah.
Yeah, I have the VA, but there was one question. I'm assuming it's a simple one. So there was a question. Ryan Kenny from Astellas. Do you still have a question?
It's actually not my question. It's a colleague of mine, but I don't know if she's joined yet.
Okay.
Okay, just let her know when she joins. You guys can raise your hand and we can
Okay,
address
great.
that question.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
So we have 15 minutes. So the what we need to do is to select the next batch of definitions that we would like to contribute to the VA Cipher Phenotype Library. Just a quick history. We did a pilot with the VA Cipher where we took the core definitions that were in the OHDSI Phenotype Library which were for the designated medical events and created a framework to test if the two libraries, the VA Cipher Library and the OHDSI Phenotype Library, could be integrated. And we were able to prove out that it is possible. And now we want to take the next batch of definitions and contribute to that library. So as you know, the OHDSI Phenotype Library still doesn't have a very good UI. It's still an art package. We're working to make it better, but it's still no work has been started on it. So I wrote a simple script here, which is to take the phenotype libraries log and select certain fields and write that into Excel, which is here. And now we have a large number of definitions in an Excel file, 690. So we need to go through this and pick the ones that we think are create like a rubric to shortlist some definitions that we want to contribute to VA Cipher, and then create an extract process so that the two libraries can sync for those selected definitions.
So Gautam, we have used the hashtag, right?
Yeah.
So we can use the hashtag to get us into a priority list. The one that we did in the first batch were basically the DMEs. So
Yeah.
those are gone already. I wonder if we just no, those are gone, right? They've gone to the Cipher. So maybe we don't look at them, and then maybe we look at the list of hashtags and use that to basically, like, the ASIs are good and definitely should go.
Okay.
Because those are the COVID OHDSI work. You have a hashtag for legend.
So if you just the AESIs will be 19 contributions. So you have narcolepsy events, facial palsy, lower motor neuron, FDA definition implementations of various narcolepsy, anaphylaxis, Bell's palsy. So these are translations during the COVID-19 work. Okay, we can do that.
So
those are good
let's
quality.
do. Yeah. So the first decision is ASIs, but the second run on the ASIs, maybe it's good to just so we have some not duplicates, but some redundancy because we have some versioning of those. Maybe we decide to submit the latest version, like anaphylaxis. We went through, it changed halfway during our COVID work, and so forth. So maybe we do ASI, and the second step on the ASI is like select the most updated version.
Sure. AESI and the second version, latest version.
Okay, second batch could be, do you have the legend? Do we have a legend?
You have a legend hashtag, yep.
Yeah, so let's send all the legend. Those are all good without any, there should not be any redundancies. Those were the ones used in the studies as is. So let's submit them as is.
That's about 74. Okay, there's maybe some duplication here which I need to clean up, but
okay, we'll follow the same process. We'll do using like matching names. We could figure out if there's any duplicates or redundancy or. Okay. So ASI's legend.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe look again at the hashtag list. If anybody else have any ideas or like have knowledge of what's in the library and have an opinion. So here's how. So there are things that came out of the other working group, like I see surgery. So came from the surgery working group. They submitted a bunch of cohorts.
52.
Yeah, and you have an author on all of them, right? And you have a clinical description. I see a hand. Anissa?
Yes, hi. I'm sorry, I was a little late. I do have
Ah.
a question. I do have a question.
Sure.
In terms of an analysis we've been running using Atlas.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the difference is. Sorry, I'm the landscape
Okay.
reserver.
Okay, Anissa, give me 1 minute. We'll go to you. Just let me finish that idea. But yeah, one minute, and we'll go to your question.
Absolutely.
So Gautam, let's do the third batch, maybe surgery, and maybe we just check with Kevin, he's your most contributor there, if he has any problem with sending those to Cipher, and if he has any issue with redundancy in them.
Evan, yeah.
Like we can send the surgery working group, and Evan, he's the leader of the working group. Just make sure it's fine with them to send those to Cipher. But they fit all. They all have they have the criteria. They have a clinical description, correct, and they have a contributor.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So maybe the next batch, Gautam, we work on sending those, the ASIs, the legends, and the surgery definitions.
I'll be about 150 to 200. Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do that batch, and then we'll see what other. But this way we represent OHDSI working groups, and we represent the COVID working group, and we represent the legend studies. I think that's a good priority list.
Yeah.
Any objections? Yeah. Richard?
I don't know I mean, I'm familiar with the legend studies and the legend phenotypes. Are these same cohort definitions with the legend that, like, can I go look at them? Where would I go look at these? I guess, are they in the phenotype library? I can take a quick look at those. All right, I just want to check them. Because one of the things, and we've been deploying Atlas in Web API in the VA, they've been running these things on R, but the way that I don't know if it's the same thing, but the way that the definition was written, it puts like a visit occurrence right at the front of the cohort definition is like a sort of like the entry criteria. And it ends up being incredibly efficient given how the CIRCB kind of translates that to a query. I don't know if that's a phenotype definition issue, like, or if it's the thing that someone grabbed something and put it in wrong. I just want to double check it because it doesn't run as it's written without a refactoring.
I know what you're talking about. So you're saying in the VA, you find that they index in the visit, or you find that they index on like a condition? How do you find them?
I'm not sure that we're talking about the same thing, so I'm sorry if I'm derailing it. Maybe we should talk offline. But what I saw is another OHDSI researcher who works in that environment had given me the definition, and it said like legend heart failure, for example. And when we tried to run it, it didn't complete, just because its entry criteria in the definition is a visit type of like something. And what happens is that gets converted by CIRCB into like this common table expression when it's got billions and billions of rows multiple times.
So we actually, like, we learned that in our like, we learned it's very inefficient to start an entry event with a visit. Like, we never do it. And with working with the VA, that's a killer. Like, never send the VA definition. And we had that experience before, I think, with remember, Joel, with Jamie trying to run we were trying to run something for a phenotype workshop, and it just killed it. And it was the visit entry criteria. The legend definition should, I believe none of them is indexing on any
They've all
type
been
visit.
fixed on that. Okay, that's good. I want to make sure that these are running. We're also trying to fix the web API, like Mark Sucard in particular, so they like to refactor that so that it doesn't cause that problem in the future. We're trying to put like Rails so that basically if someone writes that accidentally, they're gonna be told this is probably not gonna run for you.
Yeah, so, Christian Rao,
he
send us he yells at us if we have any definition starting with any type of visit. Like you're killing the sequel.
Thank you. Sorry, I want to make sure people can run them. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, let's go to Anissa's question before we close for the day.
great. And I'm sure it's just me doing something wrong.
No problem.
So I was working on a cohort and so in the cohort definitions, I did it 2 ways. In the cohort definitions, I ran it by putting in the age groups I wanted, right? So I said I wanted it between 10 and 15 or whatever. I forgot the age groups because that wouldn't want to stick in my memory. But so I ran it there, and then I also ran it in the characterization report on the same cohort, and I'm getting different numbers, and I don't know why.
Can you share your screen? Can you show us?
And how much off was it?
When I ran it using the age groups in the characterization report, a lot. Like it doubled the count for some reason. So like
is that a required? So you're saying you have a cohort definition in Atlas as a definition that says there's some criteria, maybe a certain condition, and then you're saying where age equals blah 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 to blah blah blah.
Yep.
And then you have a characterization that you're taking everybody in the cohort, that you're taking that particular cohort itself.
Yeah,
and then
I'm pulling them in on indication. So I would just say, okay, you have this indication, and I pull them in. And then I ran that through the characterization because I just needed patient counts, but then I needed to analyze each individual age one. So I'm like, oh, I'll just create separate cohorts for it because it's easier for me, which probably is not the most efficient use of my time, but it's one way to do it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. So when you create, you said you have a distribution of the age that came from characterization, and then you wanted to replicate that particular group, so have an indication, and then belong to a certain age group. That number of people didn't match the table you got from characterization when you classified them by age, correct?
Correct, exactly, you got it.
Okay, so here is the thing. What is your index in your cohort?
It literally was just the condition.
The condition. And it's the same exact condition that was in the characterization.
Correct.
And were you taking earliest event of the condition, of the indication in both cases?
We were taking the latest.
The latest. Yeah, you're taking the latest and then you're looking at age. And in both cases, you were taking the latest?
Yes. Yes, that's why I was confused. I'm like, I'm doing the exact same thing. What am I doing wrong?
It must be a date issue. And you're not requiring any look back in either cases?
No, and I'm looking at the entire database. So it's a rare population.
So the code definition is the latest occurrence of the concept set expression.
Yes.
In a person.
Yes. Is that the part? Is it the fact that I'm using the latest?
No, that shouldn't make any difference. I was trying to figure out if the cohort would yield 1 record per person or multiple record per person. Go ahead, Rich.
Oh, I'm just curious. Are you able to share your screen? Because it'd be cool to see the characterization definition. I don't know this, but I could imagine 2 different ways that you would do your age groupings in the cohort characterization. And in one way, you would have them sort of all as a subgroup all together. In another way, you might do them like as different criteria, and you would get like double counts or unusual counts if you did it the latter. So I'd like to see the definition if you could show it.
Sure. So in the
characterization, there's a way to share it too. That you can go to export and pop the JSON out, and then we can actually load it in our Atlas instances and see it too.
Okay.
While you're doing that, I think I know. I think what I know. If you look at the logic in Atlas, it's gonna apply the age criteria before it apply the latest. I'll show you. I think what's happening. I think it's picking the age. I think it's picking the age, then take the latest. That's how it does it in Atlas definition. In characterization, in characterization, it's gonna not do that. It's gonna pick the latest without any age. Then it's gonna group the age at the time of that latest.
Yeah. So if I may, Azza, if you modify the Azza is so smart. So you figure out the entry criteria, but then you put the age restriction as an inclusion rule, and that's how you would solve it. And so that will force Atlas to put the age restrictions after the last diagnosis. Otherwise, it will take the last diagnosis after the person satisfies the age.
Got it. So you're picking the age first and then the diagnosis. Okay,
Exactly,
I
exactly.
understand.
Listen,
You
Atlas is it's not that I'm smart. Atlas is very literal. It goes with the sequence exactly in the way it's on the GUI. So look at the GUI. You're saying any condition, then you apply the age as an attribute. So then it's going to do the age. Then you say take us the latest. So it's going to do age, then the criteria of the time. In characterization, you're giving it an age distribution you're giving it a cohort based on the latest, then it's categorizing these groups.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I knew it was something stupid I was doing.
I don't think that's
Easy.
stupid.
It's not stupid.
We can run into that all the time.
Okay, we have multiple. You're welcome. We have multiple action items. Joel will get your clinical description. Gowtham, don't forget about the VA. We have to send those to Jackie, and then those are the most. And then we'll follow up with Anna with the phenotypes for the submission from Phenotype February. And Gowtham, also you're following up with Richard on the appropriate use. I have them. We just need to get them the JSON into so we can do some research on them. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we'll see you guys, ladies, in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Hey, oh man, damn, that's all good.